Okay, it's a joint work with a colleague from the University of Bonn. That is Matthias Herbar. And indeed, I will speak about deformation of singular spaces in relation with a paper by G and Mantegazza that was called on flow tangent to the Ricci flow, something like that. So it has something to do with Ricci flow, but not so much as we will see. So this picture is for Riemannian spaces, Riemannian manifolds. And as you know, if you start from a space, a Riemannian manifold, and you evolve like the Ricci flow, you will become something more regular. And at some point, you may encounter the border and encounter something that we will call a singular space. I'm speaking rather in a coarse way, but here you have a singular space, and what people would like to do is to restart the Ricci flow and go back directly in the space of Riemannian spaces. Okay. So one approach for that is that you look at the Ricci flow backward and look at several curves on time intervals like that, and you try to find the limit there. If there is a unique limit, you will say, okay, I have a Ricci flow starting from this singular data, and there is the Ricci flow is starting from there. So in fact, when you do that, you do Riemannian geometry, because you look at limits, but all your spaces are Riemannian. So here I will present you the approach by G and Mantegazza that made one observation that is based on a metric theory, that is the theory of optimal transportation. And so what do they do? They take a metric space, some time parameter in the talk, the time parameters for the flow will be tau, that is positive, and they create a metric space x d tau. And what we hope is that we will be able, with this transformation, to replace singular metric spaces close to be Riemannian into Riemannian manifolds. And as you will see, it will not work so well. Now, the theory of G and Mantegazza was about this transformation for Riemannian spaces. Okay? But they don't have so much examples. So our project with Matthias was to look at 3 very easy singular spaces that are close to be Riemannian. So one is just you take R2 with a norm as a model of, let's say, a Finsler space. And as you know, the distance between x and y is obtained by minimization over curves. You start in 0, you have x, in 1, you have y, and you try to minimize the integral of the norm of gamma dot. Okay? And here, if you take a Euclidean norm, of course, you have a Riemannian manifold. So the second example is the first Heisenberg group that you all know with the Carnot-Carré distance. Let me just remind you of the fact that when you have a curve of finite length in the Heisenberg group and you project it on the 2 first factors, you obtain the Euclidean length in R2. Okay? And the last example is the following. You have a Riemannian metric that is dr squared plus r squared d theta squared. So it is R2, but you are not in the space, so in polar coordinates, okay? But you take it in the space R plus times R over alpha z. Only when alpha is 2 pi, you obtain the Euclidean plane. In other case, for alpha smaller than 2 pi, you obtain a cone. And it is a simple so-called Alexandrov space of positive curvature. So this is an Alexandrov space the simplest you can imagine. This is the Fintler space. This is the sub-Riemannian space, and we would like to look at this G Mantegazza transformation. So now, how does it work? What is this transformation? So the first thing you need is a space of probability measures over X. So you start with space of probability measures. So it is the space of measures, so with a 2 here, probability measures over X, such that the integral of the distance squared to a reference point X dot is finite. And on this space, called Wasserstein space, you have a distance. So it takes care of the fact that it may be unusual for you that big W is a distance, but in the talk it is like that, it will be a distance. Okay? So the distance between mu and nu is the infimum over some objects that are probability measures called transport plans. So you do some integral with respect to this probability measure. So it has weight 1. And what do you integrate? You integrate the distance squared of x to y. And sorry, so it is a type of L2 norm. And at the end, you put a square root. OK, so my definition is not complete because I didn't explain what is the transport plan from mu to nu. So I will not give completely the definition, but give you examples. So an example is when you have, for instance, two measures on the space X is R2 or Rn. The optimal transport plan is a plan that tells you put the mass using the translation. If one measure is only the translated measure of the other one, you translate the measure. In this case, if this vector is V, let's say, the Wasserstein distance between mu and nu is simply integral of squared of V squared. You take the mean, the square root, and of course, it is the norm of V. OK, this is one example. Another example, to explain you why you need an infimum, is mu equals nu. In this case, you have twice the same. And you could say, I'm considering a typical distance between some mass element x and some mass element y. So I pick some x, and I pick some y somewhere. And I obtain a positive result. I integrate it, and my integral will be positive. So that's a problem because this quantity is supposed to be a distance, as the distance between mu and mu is 0. So in fact, the optimal transport plan in this case is the following probability measure: identity times identity, push forward mu, that randomly considers x and y to be equal and distributed according to mu. So that's the first ingredient of the transformation. The second ingredient is the kernel. Yes. So let's say one property that is important, very important in fact, property is that the Wasserstein distance between the Dirac mass in X and the Dirac mass in Y is the distance between X and Y. So that you can embed your metric space in the space of probability measures. Okay? So now we will deform the Diracs using a kernel. So a kernel. So you, for every time parameter tau n point in X, we associate a certain measure, let's say h of x tau, that we will also denote mu tau x, like that. and with the following properties. Sorry, this is the measure. So with the following properties, the first property is that if you take one point and you weight time 0, you obtain the Dirac mass in X. And also the map H is weakly continuous. Or simply continuous. It means if you move a little there, it moves also continuously here. So if I do now a picture of the two things, you have a space X, you have a time parameter tau. Here you can see the Dirac measures as points of X. Here you have the space of probability measures. When you fix some tau here, you have different deformations of the Dirac measure. As I told you, you are in fact moving continuously. So here you obtain some measure mu tau x and another measure mu tau y. So now for parameter tau, you will no longer be interested in the distance between the Dirac masses, but in the distance between the measures obtained by deformation. This gives you the following definition. So the distance at time tau, it will not be the final definition, that's why I'm putting this sign here. Between x and y is the Wasserstein distance between mu x tau, mu y tau. So what is the problem with that? It is, on this picture you can see it. The space that you obtain here is h of x tau must not be a geodesic, totally geodesic space. It is not geodesically convex. So I give just an example. In the case of the sphere and of a flow that will be the uniform measure on a cap. So you have some x here, you have some y here. Now, I'm sorry, why do you want to have a geodesic space? Because you hope to create a Riemannian manifold. So it has to be geodesic. So in fact, there is a mid-measure in the space of measures somewhere, but it looks more like that and not really like a small cap. Okay? If you know something of optimal transport, the mass is moving like that along geodesics, and so you obtain something big here. It is more spread. So it is, so as I said, this is not geodesic, this one. So there is a very usual way to make it geodesic. It is to take the intrinsic distance. So you defined the distance at time tau between x and y as the infimum over all curves. So you take Jordan distribution. You have a step going to 0, and you consider the distance, the one of the definition 1 at time tau, between gamma at time tk and gamma at time tk plus 1. So this is the definition of the length, the metric definition of the length of gamma with respect to the distance d tilde tau. And now you minimize and you obtain a geodesic distance. Okay? So we have seen now the transformation of the metric space xd into a geodesic metric space. And I would like to explain you what it is in some special cases. Yes, I give some more examples of optimal transport that will be useful for our spaces. So, example 1, simply R, X is R. If you have a measure here and another measure here that is nu, the optimal transport, the way you have to connect the mass here and the mass here, is to put the median, so here you have 50% of the mass, to the median. So you move it. So here, if you have the last 10 percentiles, you have to move them to the last 10 percentiles. So you move it like that. So you can have simply a formula that will give you the Wasserstein distance in terms of the cumulative distribution functions. So it is integral with respect to d mu of x. So what happens here? Here you have x, and you want to take the percentiles. This is given by the so-called cumulative function. So you obtain a number between 0 and 1. After you connect with the inverse of this quantity for nu. So for instance, if I obtain 25%, this is a function that tells me where is 25% here. So you take that, you put the square and the square root. So, okay, this is one formula, but it is one of the few examples where you can concretely make computations with optimal transport. There are not so much. Another example is the example of the Wasserstein distance for a product space with the product distance between product measures. In this case, you have a Pythagorean formula. It is simply that. So why do I have using subscripts here? Because in my definition of Wasserstein distance, you remember that here there is a distance. That is the distance of the metric space to obtain a distance of the probability measures of this metric space. Okay. So now example 3. So example 3 is for infinitesimal transport. If I want to move mu on mu plus, let's say, delta mu. This is a signed measure of mass 0. Okay? So in this case, I have to solve the following equation. D mu plus the divergence of some vector field mu, let's say delta t to be homogeneous, is 0. So this V is a vector field. So this V is the infinitesimal version for the transport plan. There can be plenty of V that solves this equation, and I want to find the shortest one. So I want to take the mean over all V of the integral of V squared d mu, and take the square root again. So probably you may wonder why I can take the norm of this vector field. So in fact I am in a metric space. So this formula makes sense on manifolds, on norm spaces, on also in sub-Riemannian manifolds. Okay? In this case you will take the horizontal norm of the vector field, and we will only consider horizontal vectors. So another remark that is very important. If so V is the gradient of a function. So let's say you have a function from Rn to R. The gradient will be a map from Rn to Rn. It will be a vector field. Its solution is equivalent to the fact that V is optimal. And what does mean optimal? It means it is the vector field here that has the smallest norm. Okay, so this quantity here, I didn't write it properly, is the Wasserstein distance between mu and mu plus delta mu. Are there questions? No? Okay. So if I want to make it properly, I have to consider a curve, okay? A curve mu t, okay? And not to consider the distance, but the speed, the metric speed with respect to this, okay? And I will obtain a result that is only correct for almost every t. So I prefer to do it in a physical way and say I make a little increment and things like that. Okay, it's a heuristic statement. So now the examples. No. Now the theorem. So G Mantegazza. So it is the first example, theorem. So I have to explain you what is the kernel they are using. They are using a heat kernel. So the heat kernel, with respect to a reference measure, in our examples it is easy to consider one reference measure. And heat kernel is something that is not so useful maybe for you in metric spaces, but the new developments in this field have shown that several approaches, the one of Dirichlet forms and the one of optimal transport, gives you the same kernel, so to say. So for Riemannian manifolds, the heat kernel is clear what it is in our examples also, but it is now, so to say, possible to consider this heat kernel for all metric spaces. So, theorem. Let X D be a Riemannian compact Riemannian manifold. And I will use G for the tensor, or even G0. Then, for every positive tau, X d tau is Riemannian. So you can find some tensor G tau. And so now I'm writing the equation for the Ricci flow. Some space here. -2 Ricci. Okay, basically it is like that, but it's a little more complicated. We put gamma dot of t, of course the same here. And here it is only correct at time 0. So comments. First comment. If you take some vector in the tangent space and you want to write this xv, I didn't say, sorry, I have to finish the statement. For almost every, for every geodesic curve gamma, geodesic with respect to the initial metric, and almost every time, let's say in 0, 1, if you parameterize your curve on 0, 1. So, remarks. Now if you have some...
In your formula, it's for tau equals 0.
Yes, for tau equals 0.
What do you mean by almost every tau?
No, it's almost every t.
T.
That's why I need another letter.
Okay.
So, if you take now a tangent element, an element of the tangent space, xv, you would like to write it as gamma t, gamma dot t, but in fact, nothing tells you that in this formula you can write v, because it is for almost every time. So it is one disturbing fact. Another thing is that you may think that we have a flow. So a flow is a semi-group. And if it is correct at time 0, it is correct at any time. So we have the Ricci flow. It is called the tangent flow tangent to the Ricci flow in the title by G and Mantegazza, but it is not a semi-group. Because if you start from a distance and you create some d tau, you have now in another metric space, and you have to consider a new heat equation. And when you will be constructing d tau tau prime. So if now you want to consider d tau plus tau prime, you have to consider the initial heat equation And in fact, so you obtain something that is not necessarily the same. So that's the reason why it is something only at time 0. And the third remark, there are 3 authors, Bandara, Lasgan, and Moon, that has been considering other singular spaces. So they called it the box, so it's a cube in some dimension, and the witch hat, you know, like Halloween, the witch hat. So something like a cone and a ball because they wanted something compact, and they were not able to see if the G Montegasda transformation will make the singularities, the vertices disappear. So that's why our work with Matthias is pertinent with respect to that.
The fact that you don't have the low group on the
Yes.
it's because because on the tilde you have the on the tilde. Is it true that the
No, in fact you have no, it's not due to that. It's just you have another metric space with other distances, and the way you cook up your heat equation is related to your metric. And in fact, it's even worse. It is also related to a reference measure. And after the transformation, you transform in fact a metric measure space into a metric space. And I'm not able to tell you what is the better reference measure. But while I am erasing, let me tell you that this problem with the semigroup, there is one idea that will be to do little, to cut tau in n intervals of size tau over n, and to reiterate and go to the limit. It is the usual way you create a semigroup. Okay, on simple examples, it's not so simple to do. So now, so I'm not able at all to consider that, but maybe some other people have hope. Okay, so now examples. Example 0. It is one example. It is a sphere with the distance of the sphere. And I would like to consider mu t. Okay, mu t for t between 0 and 1. Sorry, mu t tau, a curve on the equator with center having speed 1. So I do a picture. Here you have a sphere. So the distance between 2 points at distance 1 is no longer 1. You have to replace them by heat kernels. So you have plenty of symmetries. And you have so much plenty of symmetries that you know that the result of the operation will give you again the sphere, but with another scale. So now, and in fact, it is given by this result more or less. So now, if here you go with speed 1, you can guess that the geodesics will still be the equator. But you want to see what is the new speed for that. So the new speed for that is given by the continuity equation, d mu t over dt plus divergence of some vector field mu t is 0. So here, one good candidate is a killing. So rotation, killing, rotation field. So the isometry field, the killing field, k. So if you do that, you will move everybody together, and you will indeed solve this equation. So you will be going like that. So one problem with these vector fields is that it has length 1 here, but here you are on the parallel, and the length is smaller. So what you see is that the L2 norm of k with respect to mu is strictly smaller than 1. And another problem with K is that it is not a gradient. So if it were a gradient, the parallels would be that are close curve will derive from a potential. So that's not correct. So so in fact you have d tau is equal to some constant c tau times d, the d of the sphere, with c tau that is strictly smaller than k, because I told you the minimum is given by a gradient, and that is strictly smaller than 1. So. And as you see, this transformation is making the sphere shrink. So example 1 is a very stupid example. I told you I am doing that because it is an example of a thin sphere space. So you have R2 with the distance from a norm. And in fact, it's not so, in this case, it's not so clear exactly what is the heat equation. But what you may suppose is that if you start from X, and if you consider the kernel in Y, you will have the same measure but just translated. And in Finsler, also on a vectorial, on a norm space, the translation is the optimal transport. So in this case, in fact, the distance that you obtain is exactly, so this one is the Wasserstein distance between the measures. And as I told you, it is the length of the translation vector. So it is n of y minus x. So you see that the first distance that you have, the one from the first definition, is already the geodesic distance. So it gives you, when you take the intrinsic distances that are associated to that, d tau is dn. So in fact, the transformation xd gives x d tau is just identity. So nothing happens. So I was not sure if this example is pertinent, but one thing that is possible, it is to approach this vectorial space using periodical Riemannian manifolds and let the step go to 0, and you obtain what is called the stable norm. So possibly every norm here can be a stable norm. Make a picture for what I'm saying. Here you have some pattern that is Riemannian, and here you have 0, and you let it become smaller and smaller. And to go in this direction, in a far point, you will have some geodesic doing like that. And the limit space is a space of this type. So just if you are not sure that you can obtain a Finsler space as a limit of Riemannian manifolds. So now, the Heisenberg group. With the Carano-Carathéodory distance. So you all know the vector fields, d over dx minus y over 2, d over dz. So now you can create a Riemannian metric that is based in point x, y, z, that is given in the bases x, y, z by the coefficients 1, 1, 1 over epsilon squared, and 0 everywhere. So as you know, as epsilon goes to 0, you have a symbolic matrix that would be like that. And that is the sub-Riemannian metric. Okay, so if you have some component in the third direction, while decomposing your vector there and there, the length is infinite. So only horizontal curves have finite length. So now, what is the result? theorem. For tau positive, so x tau, x d tau cc is Riemannian. I'm not writing something. I start with there exists big K and small k positive, such that you have for every tau you have the same, and so J tau, okay, is given by this matrix x squared, k squared over tau. So it may remind you of this construction. Here, as tau goes to 0, this explodes, and you obtain the sub-Riemannian structure. But you don't have the same speed. Here, the tau is not epsilon square. And you have a metric that is not the Heisenberg, that is not pointwise the Heisenberg group, but the Heisenberg group up to a factor k. And as you know, the Heisenberg group with the Carnot-Carter distance multiplied by k is again the Heisenberg group. So in some sense, it converges in point Gromov-Hausdorff distance as tau goes to 0 to the usual Heisenberg group. But it's not a natural sense, because if now you perturbate a little your space, you will not have this dilation facility. So remarks on it. Remarks first of all on k and small k. And I introduce a notation. So let's say h is, or h tau is the density, or x is the density of mu tau x with respect to the Lebesgue measure. So you have to solve the following. You want to solve. So big K is the infimum over all V, where of the L2 norm with respect to mu 0, 0, 0 for all V that are horizontal. And here I am also considering a L2 norm that is horizontal for the following equation: d over dt of mu t0. I will directly write it for the density, h t0, 0 tau plus divergence of v h t0, 0 equals 0. So in fact, there indeed exists some vector field that is horizontal and that permits you to solve this equation. You have the same for little k. You are now moving your measure in this direction. So I'm writing d over dt of h 0, 0 t plus divergence of some v h 0, 0 t equals 0. And again, I have the same formula. So now what we can prove is that they are finite. This infimum is not infinity. So first remark, k is finite. So one vector field that you can consider is the following. You take V, that is y h x plus, let's say, yes, plus minus x h y, and you divide by h. So now the divergence of v h is the divergence of y h x minus x hy. And as you know, the divergence in the Heisenberg group, these x and these y are divergence-free vectors, vector fields. So you can simply use the formula x of yx plus y of minus xh. Of course, you recognize z of h. And okay, so now on this block, I have computed this divergence, and it is z of h. And so this is exactly what happens if you have your density moving in this direction. The derivative with respect to time, if you go with the speed 1, is the derivative with respect to z. So you have something that is a vector field, that is an horizontal vector field, that is not a gradient. So it will not be optimal. But you have something. And now we have to prove that its norm is finite. So the L2 norm, the horizontal L2 norm of this vector field is the integral of xh squared plus yh squared over h square h, Lebesgue measure, with a square root. So in fact, this is a well-known quantity. So that is that equals square root. I'm sorry. So maybe I have a problem. This is 2 over tau. But okay. Okay, here this is the square, the norm squared. So here I have that. So in fact, what we obtain is that k is smaller, k squared is smaller than 2 over tau. So this quantity is well known in optimal transport. It is the so-called Fisher information. And it has been proved by Baudouin, Bakri, Bonnefond, Shafai, for instance, that this is a finite integral. So now you can do something similar with k. Why is it finite? And you start with driver Melchior inequality. So this is again an inequality for the Heisenberg group about its semi-groups. So you have a PT of f. You take the gradient of it. So I think here you have the square. And here you put, and see here you have a certain, so and see this, you compare it with PT of, so is it correct? I'm not sure. So what is f? F is something that you can differentiate, let's say smooth and bounded. PT is the heat, the hypoelliptic heat equation semi-group. And here you have the horizontal gradient, and you have this inequality. This is related to the Bakri-Emery theory. This coefficient here in Riemannian manifolds is usually exponential minus kt, where k is a bound on the Ricci curvature. So for t close to 0, it is 1. Okay. Here in the subelliptic setting, you have a quantity C2 that is strictly positive. So I have a C2 that is in square root of 2 plus infinity. So it's not possible to have 1 here. So you have that. And after you have something that relate this semi-group inequality with our optimal transportation setting that is called a lemma, Kuada lemma. Kuada duality. So you will have the same constant, and here you will have the Wasserstein distance of mu tau x, mu y. Mu tau 1 smaller than C2. The Carnot-Carter distance between x and y. So let me remind you that it is simply the distance d tilde at time tau between x and y. Okay, this is not an intrinsic distance, this is an intrinsic distance, but you can now obtain the same inequality for the intrinsic distance using the definition. And what you obtain is k squared over 2 smaller than c2, let's say squared, 1 infinity. So you have one conclusion, that is k squared is smaller than c2 squared. That is a finite quantity. And we know something about c2 squared, that it is greater than 2. And one conjecture by Driver and Melker is that this c2 here is in fact equal to square root of 2. So now that we know that I didn't finish. So I have been using implications, but in fact, you have really k equals c2. So this k that we have in our problem is the same like the c2 in this equation by Driver Maker, that they're supposed to be equal to square root of 2. So they assume it is like that, but they cannot prove it. So maybe someone here would be interested in proving that. You have this equation. You want to find a gradient that is horizontal in order to have 0, and you want to look at the minimal norm of it. And this minimal norm will be this C2. So I have maybe some time just for the third example, that is the cone. So the cone, we didn't manage to do it for every angle alpha, but only for alpha equals 2 pi over 2 or 2 pi over 4. So what is our approach? Our approach is that you have this transformation, a rotation of angle 2 pi over n, that transforms z in c into z exponential I 2 pi over n. So, and you can say simply that your cone of angle 2 pi over n is isometric to R2 divided by the group spanned by the rotation. So in fact, we are not considering a point x bar, class of x, at distance r, but some picture. Here I do the picture for n equals 4, where you have the same distance r, but one point x, r 4 of x, and again one point, and again another point. So we replace a situation that is not so weird by an easier situation. So now what is heat flow here? Heat flow is simply take one point, consider the heat kernel, and project it using the quotient. So you obtain something like that. It can be the projection for this point. It can be also the projection for this point. It can be also the half sum of the two. And you project and you will obtain that. So now we can pull back our problem on R2. So what is our problem is to compute Wasserstein distances between measures on the cone, and we want to compute Wasserstein distances between measures on R2. So what we introduce is a new x tau, that is mu x. So the sum of all mu n k for k between 0 and n minus 1. So we make the rotation and we divide by n. So on this picture, it is a measure that is the mean of 4 heat kernels. Okay. And another lemma is that the distance on the cone of the heat kernels is the distance of the measures here on R2. So now for n equals 2, it is good for us because it is quite good for computations. Because for instance, here you have a Gaussian measure, here you have a Gaussian measure. It is the product of a Gaussian half sum and a Gaussian, it's not good, beautiful, but and a Gaussian measure. So this is this product, this is a product space. So I shown you in the examples that we know how to do that. And this is one-dimensional, so we have facilities to compute it. For n equals 4, it is the same, but you don't use the two axes like that, you use the axis like that. Okay, you have a double wave and another double wave. And you can compute it conveniently. So now the result is theorem. There exist two functions. We don't know how smooth they are from R plus to R plus, such that for every time parameter tau, the metric, let's say x d tau, so here, sorry, it is the cone, is given by the following rough, the coarse metric. So G tau is dr squared plus r2 d theta squared. And here we add a of r over square root of tau. So the square root of tau is due to the invariance of the problem and of its equation. B r over square root of tau. So without a and b, you have the usual polar the metric in polar coordinates. So you have a and b that goes to 1 in infinity. So the asymptotic behavior is exactly the one of the cone you are. And you have also that. So for n equal 2, you have a is equivalent to r over 2, r squared over 2 in 0 plus. B is equivalent to r2 over 4. And for n equals 4, you have r2 over 4, and b is big O of r to the power 6. So it's just computation. Now interpretation in terms of geometry, but it's not a geometric explanation for that. You obtain a first thing that is not Riemannian. So you may think maybe that nothing happens with the angle. So we have initially an angle of 2 pi over 2. What you obtain is a new angle that is square root of 2 pi. So it is bigger, something that looks like that, close to the apex, and that has an angle pi asymptotically. Okay, something like that. So it seems that it's bigger. Maybe it is an Alexander space. It is good. Maybe it's its transformations make Alexander space into Alexander spaces. In fact, not, because for n equals 4, you obtain a new angle that is 0. Completely different behavior. So you have something like that. Some metric cone like that. So in fact, it is not an Alexander space, for instance, because you may have geodesics that start from the same point with an angle 0, but that are not the same. So I don't know what are the conclusions of those computations. Hopefully, it can lead, for instance, to a computation of the constant C2, or maybe it can interest people. So that's all. Thank you for your attention.